They're the same age, right? So if two 14-year-olds in year 9 have sexual intercourse with each other, it's not seen as paedophilia. But what if now you have a year 12, year 13, like an 18-year-old, he wants to identify as a 14-year-old, comes into school, has a 14-year-old girlfriend, 13-year-old, now what? Well, he's identified, the teachers have accepted the identification. So to what extent now is there a tension between the law of consent and the self-identification of this person? So are you telling me now, because this is the implication of this, it's very important, you're saying, because they would say no, this is an exception, we're not going to allow him to identify with a younger age. But if that's the case, what you're saying is that the state knows best how to identify you in a legal way.
Yeah.
But that defies the whole reason. So what you're saying to me is, I would argue, that gender's okay because it doesn't have any consequences on the economy, on the political and social environment, because it doesn't harm anyone sometimes it does. Right, no, yeah. Yes, yeah, exactly. We talked about that, yeah. No, 100%. But then in the case of age, where you see, okay, pedophilia, this and that, child's rights, disabled. Can I identify as a disabled person if I'm not disabled? Am I entitled to disability living allowance?
Yeah, exactly.
No, honestly, I mean, where does it end? Because if I say I'm disabled, the doctor says, no, you're not disabled. But the doctor has given me a biological rendering. He's given me a scientific conclusion. But I'm a postmodernist. I don't believe in science to this extent. I believe my postmodernistic identification of myself supersedes your biological determinism. Therefore, I want to identify, you know what I'm trying to say, as what? As disabled. I'm blind. Give me a multibility vehicle. Give me 300, 400 pounds a month, please, because I'm blind, or I'm whatever it may be, and so on, right? So where does it end? Because if the state starts saying no, you can't identify as disabled because you require biological scientific evidence for that. You can't identify as 14 because you require biological science. Then there's a contradiction, because you can't say that, but then you can say you can identify with a man because we disregard the biology there.
Yeah.
So if it's XX, yeah, if it's XY, it's XY. That's science.
The far right are gonna love
right?
you
Right? If it's XY, it's XY. If it's XY, it's
Tommy's
XY.
gonna invite us now.
No, tell me. Well, he already did.
We need to go meet.
Right? If it's XY, it's XY. If it's XX, it's XX. That's a chromosome. You can't change that. It's biologically determined. But how comes that can be changed and manipulated, and identification of the self can be superseded in that instance? But when it comes to age and disability and race, in some cases, some would argue that's not the case. That's why the left-wing postmodernist has to really reassess their ontology, really.
Well, some people say that they are doing it with an end thing to actually try and help promote, like you said, pedosexuals. They call themselves pedosexuals. They're
Is that a new one?
They're trying to latch themselves onto the LGBT movement so that they can be the P on the end. And they call themselves MAPS, minor attracted person or something.
They're
trying to make it a normal thing.
Yes.
And it's part of,
The problem. I'll be honest with you. The problem. There is a problem, and the problem is that the state itself doesn't have any rigid biological way of defining a child. It doesn't have that, and different states have different identifications. It's true, but the point is, if it has set something, in this case, it's the age of 16. Yeah, if that's the arbitrary, subjective, but it's a social, legalistic thing. But they've put it 16 is the age of consent. Then it has to be consistent. And now, if you also say you have a free right to identify yourself, then surely that could not mean that there are any exceptions whatsoever, because that will actually it defeats the purpose of self-identification with whatever you want. So if I'm a 16-year-old that wants to identify as 15, 14, 13, 12, yeah, then I can do it. I should be able to do that.
I agree.
Then I don't have sex with
a transphobe now, probably.
No.
But I agree with what you're saying. Where's it going to end?
Where can it end?
It would just like eat itself up, this little thing.
Oh, 100%. I absolutely agree with that phrase, because it will eat itself up. The reason why it'll eat itself up is because human beings require certainty. That's one of the things that human beings... And language provides a kind of communicative... or it fulfills a communicative functionality, right? And if you take that communicative functionality out of language, then language becomes worthless. So you can have... I mean, these people are literally living a life of delusion. A lot of them are deluded. Because what is deluded? Delusion. What is delusion? If someone says, I'm 55 years old, but actually I'm 17, or I'm 15. Isn't that delusion?
Yeah. Well, I can't so often say I'm 50 going on 17, but that's just because I feel like I'm young at heart. I don't literally think.
No,
I don't think I actually am. I just think I have a young spirit.
You look young.
That's all.
Are you over 25, 30?
Yeah.
Anyways, I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to talk, but we agree on this point.
Yeah.
Because I think the way
It's the easiest argument to
I think
destroy.
we've killed it.
the way things are going to is that now the scientists and doctors they're able to manipulate much more within the human anatomy. So who knows where we're going to be, what we're going to be medically, what we're going to medically become genetically in the future. So maybe new pronouns and that are going to need to be developed, for people for what we're going to become. Maybe people will be absolutely androgynous.
Absolutely.
This is where they're looking to go as well.
I think this is, do you know what this is symptomatic of? This whole gender thing is an extension of third wave feminism, okay? Now, third wave feminism differs in complexion and intellectual argumentation from second wave feminism, in so much as a lot of third wave feminists argued that sex is a social construction. Now, second wave feminists like de Beauvoir, etc., argued that gender was a social construction, which is a much easier argumentation to make. But to argue that sex is, once again, it defeats the purpose, because as many of, I think Judith Butler is one of them, but many of other third wave feminists say that the penis is a social construction, right? The vagina is a so if that's the case, if you believe that sex is a social construction, then where do we stop in our understanding of things as social constructions? Because you're going to say that sex is a social construction, race is a social construction, ethnicity is a social construction, nationality is a social construction.
Santa Claus is a social construction. No, don't tell me that.
You can't do that. This is Sharia. No, this is Sharia no-go zone area.
But do you know the argument of social construction is problematic on two levels. Number one, let us agree, for the sake of argument, that sex is a social construction. Or let's agree that masculinity is a social construction, right? Now, it's a genetic fallacy to say just because something is a social construction, it means it's false. There are many social constructions which are true, right? It doesn't mean that because something is socially constructed, that's where the origin of the idea is, that must mean that the idea is false. That's a genetic fallacy, right? Just because something is social, it doesn't mean, number one, it's completely disparate with intuitionism. Something could be a social construction as a result of a combined intuitive experience of collective peoples in a given place. So in other words, people feel something naturally, and then that natural collection of feelings, subjective experiences, combines into what is then referred to as social construction. But even so, you can say that some things which are intuitive might be problematic. So someone might have aggressive urges which might lead them to murder. Now that's not a social construction, but it's, according to society, something which is wrong. Right?
It could be in the way that they kill people. It could be an element of social construction based around culture.
Yes.
As in some sexuality. A woman dresses up in lingerie, you might find it attractive. Another culture, a man, might find that, that's disgusting. Might not.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Right. So look, the idea, just because something is a social construction doesn't mean it's wrong. Number one. Number two, even you can't prove that what that person is saying is not a social construction. So with a third wave feminist, what I would ask is, how do you know what you're saying is not a social construction? How can you prove that what you're saying is not a social construction?
And why does the BBC not want to hear, like, for example, that they want to hear maybe the third wave feminists, their social construction, but not other people's perspective of what a social construction like yours?
I think that the
question.
BBC is a little bit more. I mean, I don't know. I can't comment on the BBC because I haven't done a data analysis.
I'm not,
Right, but I think that the issue is that a lot of mainstream organisations want to prove their liberal credentials.
Sure.
They want to prove that they're as inclusive as possible, as tolerant as possible, and so on. And that they are open to new ideas and openness and these things.
Yeah.
But what the argument we're making today is that has to have parameters.
Yeah.
All right? And if those parameters are not clearly defined, then you're going to find yourself in circular arguments and you're never going to get to the bottom of anything.
Especially with children, they need to know like boundaries and different things. Otherwise, they're just going to get. Of course, they're going to be confused. Yeah. It's just, oh god.
Can I give you an example of the BBC?
So they won't get confused, but they won't
what they do.
more.
Yeah.
When they show a certain perspective like the BBC, they'll promote, feminism. They promote this feminism. They say women got the right to vote in 1918.
Yes.
But actually, at the same time that women got the right to vote, a large percentage of men did too. Because many men who didn't own land.
Yeah, black people.
Also couldn't vote.
Black people couldn't vote.
But they don't, even men, just white men in their own society. 90s. Around
Yeah, I think that the workers something voting act or something like that was in the mid 19th century, 1800s.
This was definitely 1918. Have a look into it.
The men, I think you had different things. So for example, 1918, women over the age of 30 could vote.
Right.
It was I think in 1930 something that women over the age of 18 could vote. So there was, and men, white men, like you said, there were certain men that were excluded from voting in the 19th century. But that's a whole discussion. And black people in America couldn't vote, and there was all these things going on at the same time.
They do push.
50s. That wasn't that long ago, was it? Like in the 50s, they still had to sit on.
But let's be honest. What is voting now? It's first past the post system. You have two choices. Frankly, I mean, what kind of a choice is that?
They want to stop UKIP.
Yes.
They all lie anyway.
That's gone now. No, honestly, you got two choices.
I know.
For the most part, the best you can do is probably get a local MP of the party you like in one area, but you're not going to get them in government. And it shows you the restrictive nature of so-called democracy. You've got two choices, really, and they're both, in David Cameron's word, fighting for middle ground. So I mean, the centre, British politics is focused on centre ground. They're all fighting for it, and you've got two choices between blue and red. I mean, these jargons don't faze me, because I know that democracy and liberalism, in implementation, when you actually look at them with a critical eye, you start realizing these flaws and these problems.
I need to go. Can I?
Yeah.
Can I
Yes.
Can I do it? Sorry. What's that? No. Can we do it?
Anyways, guys, I'm
I-
going to go and walk around as well. But thank you very
walk
much for
around?
everything. Yeah.
I'm getting a sore neck.
Can we quickly do? Can I just borrow you three? Yeah, you as well. You three, and you. Yeah. I'm gonna do a video. Yeah.
You're not going to stand on my head or something.
No.